Hello and welcome to another episode of Ghost Stories. I'm your host Drifter, and in today's episode we're going to be doing things a little bit differently from normal. The first thing you're going to notice here is the gameplay is something that's almost never on my channel, which is Search and Destroy, because I don't normally play Search and Destroy. As a matter of fact, this is my very first Search and Destroy game ever in Modern Warfare 3. I'm playing with S&D for Dummies here, and some of you might know him. His channel's down there in the description, and this is a very honest commentary, so I wanted to use very honest gameplay. The first two games you're going to see are my first and second games ever playing Search and Destroy, and then the other ones are some of the better games that I have played, because some of them I just got trashed. Honestly, I just didn't do very good, so I don't really want to post them. Should be about 4 or 5 games in total here, and the episode format's going to be a little bit different too, because this is more of a story of analysis and criticism on Ghost Stories. I tell a lot of things here, and a lot of you take these stories at face value with very little criticism, which is actually concerning me in a way. And in the last episode I asked for user stories, and I probably got about 200 to 300 of them, ranging from interesting to you need to check yourself into a mental ward right away, just depending on the person and the writing style and how concerned they were. So what I'm going to do is Keith is going to tell a story from his life, and then I'm going to discuss it. I'm going to tell you whether I believe it or not, and then offer some counterpoints, some things that may discredit the story, may say, oh, well, this is a weakness of human psychology. When you breathe too much carbon monoxide, this can happen. Oh, did you know about this interesting aspect of the human brain that does this thing here and makes you see that? So it should be something of an interesting episode, and I hope you enjoy it. Now, without further ado, let me tell my very first story. This happened just yesterday morning, or maybe you could call it yesterday evening. Me and my wife are kind of on the reverse vampire sleep schedule because we're both very much so night people, so those terms are interchangeable and confusing for me and a lot of my friends. My wife and I were sleeping in the bed. Everything was fine. I had something of a bad dream and woke up. It was bad, nothing like epic dream level bad, just something unpleasant. And as soon as I woke up, I rolled over a little bit. This disturbed my wife, and she started talking to me in her sleep. She said to me, Brad, we need to help the little girl. And I was like, Jessica, what are you talking about now? She says, the little girl, we need to set her free. We need to help her. And I'm a little bit concerned and confused, but I'm also interested, so I keep asking her questions. I'm like, okay, what little girl? And she points at a corner in the room that's probably about 4 feet from where we're sitting, and she says, the little girl in the corner. There's absolutely nothing in the corner but an old chest of drawers and maybe some dog hair floating around. Nothing there, but it's dark. I just had a bad dream. I'm concerned. I really don't like this little girl in the corner. And I'm like, okay, Jessica, what little girl in the corner? I don't see a little girl. And she says, it's the little girl in the corner. She's covered in chains and has pipes stuck in her. And I'm like, what? I was like, Jessica, are you sure? And she's like, yes, the little girl's in the corner and she's covered with chains and pipes and this. So now I'm very, very concerned. I was like, okay, Jessica, how do we need to help the little girl? She says, we need to set her free. We need to set her free from all the chains and the pipes. And I'm like, oh shit, what's going on here? I don't like this at all. This is I'm about tripping balls here, but I'm more curious than I am scared, so I press her more. She's still asleep at this point, still talking in her sleep. And I'm like, okay, Jessica, why do we need to set her free? And she says, if we don't set her free, she'll never win the Nobel Prize for salmon. I'm like, oh, what? It's like, yeah, she's something about researching salmon. She has to win the Nobel Prize, that we need to get the chains off of the little girl. And it's becoming clear to me that this very creepy thing that was happening is just a random combination of words. So I asked my wife again, I just keep pressing her, okay, how do we do that? And then she just totally started mumbling something about oranges, kind of like the oranges you eat, and then something about a telephone, and it was all gibberish, and it was very scary for a little bit, but now I find it to be very funny. And this is one of those things that happen when you're in a scary situation. I woke up scared, I woke up disturbed, it's dark, my wife is talking nonsense about a little girl in the corner covered with chains that we need to set free. If I had stopped there, if I had stopped right there and not asked any more questions, I would be telling a very different story today. I would be telling you guys about how my wife is seeing things in her sleep and I don't feel comfortable in my house and things like that. But when I press a little bit further and get the complete picture and all the information, I understand it much better, in that it was just random sleep gibberish, that people do that, and this one time just happened to be a very creepy combination of sleep gibberish. So there's a great deal of importance in seeing the whole picture and getting all the facts and all the information, especially on the internet. You'll see a lot of outrageous claims One of the ones I saw recently was somebody linked on Reddit to a Wikipedia article about Russians finding quackers, or strange marine-based sounds in the Arctic Sea, very large sounds that would communicate with each other and indicate that a submarine was passing. And the whole article was designed to be more like, oh, there's definitely some undiscovered intelligent creature in the Arctic. And I looked through there, and there were no actual citations, no links to anything relevant. It was all just nonsense. And you find this with a lot of claims on the internet, that there are no citations, that there are pieces of information missing, that they're only telling half the story, that the girl that claimed to be talking to ghosts and did these amazing things 2 years later, come to find out she was a complete fraud. That's how these things happen. So whenever you encounter a bad situation, you always want to get the absolute best information and the most information that you can about it before passing judgment. Now that I've had my spill and almost taken up 5 minutes of this episode, let's pass it over to Keith.
Hey guys, what's going on? Keith here, also known as Keith4Prez on YouTube and Xbox Live. And first, I'd like to say hello, how's everybody doing? And thank you to Drift0r for having me on his channel. A while ago, he did go ahead and issue a statement that said, hey, if you've had any paranormal things happen to you, then let me know. And so here I am. I'm a very skeptical person, but I've had a lot of strange things happen to me in my life. So let's get started. The first paranormal experience I can remember is when I was about 4 years old. I was in the back seat of my parents' vehicle, and I remember looking at the passenger side window, and on the reflection there was like this demonic face. I remember looking at my mother. Well, she wasn't looking at me, obviously, she was sitting in front of me, but I said, hey, there's like a reflection in the window, and it's very strange. And she didn't even bother to look at it. She just said, yeah, that's my reflection, so it's natural, it happens. And I just remember thinking, wow, that's really crazy. But when you're 4 or 5 years old, you believe anything your parents say. So that's the first of many strange things to happen to me.
This is a good time for me to step in and say that I typically don't believe stories that happen to people when they're very, very young. I don't know how many of you remember being very, very young, 4, 5, 6, 7. I don't know how well you remember those periods of time, but generally speaking, the human brain is nowhere close to being fully developed at this time. As a matter of fact, it's undergoing very rapid changes, hormonally, size, development, understanding of the world, and general intake of knowledge. Children of this age, they believe their imaginary friends are real. If given the right inputs on television and parents, they will believe absolutely 100% in angels, demons, ghosts, goblins. Auditory and visual hallucinations are somewhat common among children in this range, or at that age it's very difficult to distinguish for them what's real and fantasy. Sometimes the things they see on TV appear to be very, very real, and sometimes the things they see in a dream appear to be very, very real, and they often misinterpret very simple information. Large machines, complicated things, small pranks, misplacing an item is very easily blamed on a ghost. So even though many of the stories that I've told on here happened to me at a very young age, I would tell you not to trust stories that happen to people when they're very, very young, because they're just so impressionable at that age.
A lot of weird things have happened in the house that I live in and I grew up in. Oh, at a point in time, I actually did not live here, and my sister and her boyfriend did. One day he was sitting on the computer at the computer desk, and he had a drink that was sitting on the desk itself. Now, while he was looking at the screen, his drink, which was almost completely full, he said, it slid like 6 inches to the left very quickly, and he didn't expect it. It really freaked him out, so that's one of many things that did happen here that were quite strange.
That story sounds very, very strange, but when you apply just a little bit of science, it's going to make a lot more sense. I'm going to assume that most of you have handled a cold beverage before. Cold glass of milk, soda, glass ice water perhaps, a beer. For those of you that are from Eastern Europe that may be not from America, anywhere in the world, it is very common here for us to put ice in the drinks or to make sure that they are exceptionally cold before we drink them. Now, as a cold drink warms up, water, moisture from the air, collects on the drinks and is going to slide down, and it's going to make a little layer of moisture around the bottom. And what you'll find is that when the bottom is very, very moist, a very thin layer of water, and the other two surfaces are what you would call hydrophobic. Water doesn't attract to them very well like it can because it slides off, or glass or wooden desk because it doesn't very much so stick. Even a very slight breeze or a very small inclination on the desk and just a very tiny starting force, a bump, like I said, the man's brother could have breathed a little bit, and it will start sliding, especially if there's a nice incline. You can get it to slide 3 or 4 inches very, very easily. And if you don't believe me, this can be scaled up quite significantly. There's a place out in Arizona, if I'm not mistaken, where they have what they call sailing stones, these giant 400-pound rocks that you look out on the salt flats, and there's these really long tracks, and they move overnight. And they thought that they called them the devil stones, the magic rocks and things like that. And the only thing that was really happening out there is it would get very cold in the desert at night, reheat and all this sort of stuff. You'd get the dew, the water moisture on the top layer of clay, a decent gust of wind, and these things would slide along a perfectly flat surface for a very long distance. And that's exactly what happened to Keith's brother's drink here.
Now, living in this house that I've been in for so long, I do have other things that have happened. I always get the feeling when I'm going in my bedroom, which is directly across from the den, I have this feeling that someone's staring at me, and I've always had it for many years, and it seems strongest as I'm opening my door, like it could actually come out and grab me. It's a very weird feeling, and it just has never gone away, but it only happens at night. I'm not sure why that happens.
This is a feeling that I've had very, very many times, the feeling of being stared at. Even worse when you're in an area with many people there with you, with several friends and family, and you still have the feeling that something else somewhere beyond time and space is just gawping at you. And it's a feeling that I absolutely hate, but it's a very common feeling. Almost everybody has this at least once or twice in their life. Many people have it all the time. And I think this has to do with our evolutionary background as human beings. We evolved kind of to avoid predators and live, of course. So there are certain conditions, certain lighting conditions, certain humidity, certain air pressure ratios and things. I tried to find the study so I can link you guys, but I just couldn't. I believe it was a British team. They managed to manufacture a scenario where something around 90% of people would say that they were feeling like they were being looked at from somewhere else but couldn't identify what. So it is a very common thing, and I believe that this is a very biological thing, but when it happens to you, I gotta tell you, it feels awful.
Now, yet another thing that has happened inside the house is that, and again, this is a time that I didn't live in the house, but my family would come home, and they would see that the vents, for the air conditioner and all that, they would be completely lifted up out of the ground and flipped over, sitting beside where it's supposed to go, actually. And this happened many different times, and these are heavy vents, so there's no way that someone just, maybe tripped over it and it pulled it out or something like that. It's a very strange occurrence, and it only happened for a certain period of time, then completely stopped. We checked the vents to make sure that there weren't any, animals that could get inside of them and maybe push them open, even though it'd be very hard given the angle and the weight of the vents, and there was nothing. There's no way for an animal to get in there that could be big enough to push it out. So another very strange thing that has happened inside this house.
This is an example of something that I would attribute to paranormal or completely unknown because I don't understand anything about vents. There was physical evidence left behind, multiple witnesses, no reason, no logic really, and nothing that they tried could explain it. Maybe not a ghost, maybe just some sort of natural phenomena or some aspect of vent work that I don't know anything about, but it is something that I have no explanation for and I find creepy.
Now, this might be one of the creepiest things that has happened. A girlfriend that I had many years ago, she was coming over to see me. I was in my bedroom, and she pulled up, and then she called me on the phone. I don't know why she didn't knock on the door, she just did. And I answered, and she said, "Hey, you were just looking at me the whole time I was pulling up your driveway. Why'd you go back to your room? Why didn't you stay here and let me in?" And I told her, I said, I've been in my bedroom the whole time, there's no one else here. And so that was a very strange thing, and it only happened that one time, so apparently something was looking at her through the window. And I said, could it have been, maybe a shadow or something? And she said, no, it was clearly 100% a human. So that's a very, very weird thing that happened.
Stories like this tend to hit listeners pretty hard because they are believable. scary and emotional because it's your home, it's being violated in ways that you don't understand, and it suggests an intruder, which is an age-old problem in human society. The limitations on this story are the witness's perception. Was it a shadow? Was it dark outside? How clearly was it a person? How sleepy was she? Was she drinking? Was she tired? How well does Keith remember this story? There's no hazard in believing something like this. There's no reason that I say you shouldn't, but there's also no reason that I say that you should. And you also have to consider the very human psychological trait of trying to recognize faces and things. We as human beings are hardwired to identify other humans. This is a survival trait for us. There is a long, complicated technical name for it that I forget, but it's the tendency for human beings to recognize faces, especially faces. We're very attuned to facial emotions, expressions, and picking faces out of a crowd, and things where they're not there. That's why people see the Virgin Mary on a toast. That's why we have the man in the moon. That's why you have smoke demons, crowd monsters. That's why when there's weird shadows, you see a lot of people complaining about shadow people, because one of the very first things the human brain does when it looks at something, it classifies it as human or not human, and if there's a shape, a foot, an arm, a face, an ear, an eye, a tuft, a hair, childish, 5-part body structure sticking out, it's going to pick up as human. So a lot of times people think that they're seeing other people or ghosts or apparitions there when it's really just a little puff of smoke or fog or something.
One of the scariest things that can happen to you is to wake up and have a presence be in your bedroom. It makes you feel helpless. It's one of the most scary things that's ever happened in my life. One day I woke up and there was this dark figure next to my bed. It was almost like a silhouette, but there was matter there, like it wasn't a shadow. So I woke up and I turned over and I saw this dark figure. It was maybe about 4 feet tall, and it only slightly resembled a human. I couldn't make out any features like a face or arms or anything, but it definitely creeped me out, and I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night.
Another very common experience is waking up to what Keith describes as there being a presence in the room. This happens to a lot of people, happens all the time. You can read about it, and it happens so frequently that I would like to think that it's another common biological or mental problem that people have, although I've had this happen to me, and it is absolutely terrifying. There's no way to escape the horror of when this happens. My best explanations for why this happened would be that you're drowsy and you're seeing things, you're half asleep, you're kind of dreaming, daydreaming, I guess you'd call it, night dreaming or something like that. Or the most frequent thing that you're going to see is sleep paralysis. I don't know how many of you are familiar with sleep paralysis, but this is a problem that I've had before, and I'll give you a brief overview of it. Basically, when your body goes to sleep, your brain kind of half paralyzes you, so that when you're dreaming, you can't like run in the bed or punch yourself in the face or do any of these crazy things, or not very well. And sometimes people have a dream so bad, or just any situation, they'll wake up from sleep, but the brain will still leave the body almost completely paralyzed and unable to move. And the worst part about this is that you can't breathe, or you can breathe, but you can't feel yourself breathing. You can't feel your arms, you can't feel your legs, you can't feel your lungs pumping air in and out. So most people feel like they're paralyzed. They're numb, they're suffocating, they're suffering, and it's a very, very awful feeling, and it's absolutely horrifying when you wake up. Many people that wake up like this are also half asleep, so they're seeing things from a dream state, and one of the common things that people say they see is a demon sitting on their stomach, pressing down on them, or sitting on their chest, choking them. This is the origin of the ancient succubi and incubi that would visit people at night. And more commonly, a lot of alien abductions are attributed to sleep paralysis. It's just the new boogeyman, a new thing that people dream about.
One of my first jobs was working in a grocery store. I know, it's not a great job, but it paid the bills at the time. I worked as an overnight stock boy, and it was a pretty large grocery store, and sometimes, rarely, I would actually be in the store all by myself, which was a very strange experience. I remember one day I was basically arranging the groceries on the top shelf at one of the aisles, and I started hearing footsteps at one end of the aisle, and it went almost all the way to the other, and it was like a woman in high heels. And it's something that it wasn't coming from the vents, it was clearly coming from on the floor, and it was just steady, like a human's footsteps. So I pulled out my box cutter like a badass, and I was going to go take care of business and cut this ghost lady up or whatever it was. But as soon as I went around the corner, there was no one there. I checked the whole store, and there was absolutely no one there. I have no way to explain it. I don't know what happened, but definitely one of the creepiest things that's ever happened to me.
Man, that is a very, very creepy story, and I just hope that you didn't work there much longer. I hope that you got a new and less ghost-filled job very soon. Ladies and gentlemen of the audience, I hope that you enjoyed the episode. I hope that you enjoyed Keith's stories and my commentary and criticism. Not sure what we're doing for the next episode, but it's going to be something interesting. And please be sure to stop by Keith's channel and tell him thank you for the stories and for opening himself up to being criticized, because not many people would do that.
In conclusion, I'd just like to thank Drifter and thank you all for listening to my crazy stories. I certainly appreciate it, and you all take care.